April 4, 1977. I remember that day as if it happened yesterday. That day I saw firsthand the results of the most deadly aircraft disaster in Georgia's history. The recently passed 46th anniversary of that crash reminded me of the events of that day, which prompted me to share, in my own words, the horrific events that I witnessed at the crash site of Southern Airways Flight 242. On April 4, 1977, the date that Southern Airways Flight 242 crashed in New Hope, Georgia, I was driving home from work listening to the radio, when the music abruptly stopped, and the disc jockey, Gary McKee of WQXI-FM, broke in with an urgent news alert. He said that an airliner had just crashed in the community of New Hope, with major fatalities confirmed. The small community of New Hope is located about 25 miles northwest of Atlanta. I distinctly remember that it was around 5:10 p.m. when I heard the announcement. At the time, I was only about 3 or 4 minutes from home and had already decided that as soon as I arrived, I would mount my motorcycle and head to New Hope. My home was approximately 5 minutes from there. I was on my way to New Hope when I came upon a roadblock, approximately 1/3 of a mile from the crash site. I ended up parking my motorcycle in a field just off the roadway, and began to run the rest of the way to the crash site. I arrived at the crash site less than 45 minutes after the accident had occurred. The scene that I beheld when I got there was sheer chaos. There was the stench of aviation fuel in the air, along with the odor of fresh cut, but, in this case, severed, pine trees. As I made my way into the debris field, I witnessed sights that I now wish I had not seen. There were dead bodies, still strapped into their seats, tangled up in power lines, and hanging from the limbs of trees. Other bodies lay scattered on the ground around the crash site, still strapped into their seats. I saw a man, whom was still alive, and had been ejected from the plane, still strapped in his seat with his legs severed just below his knees. I saw another man with his arms burned off at his elbows, aimlessly walking around, muttering to himself. I saw other victims standing near the plane debris, and when I got closer, I realized that they were softly repeating over and over, help me, please." At the time I could not understand why they were whispering instead of yelling, due to the severity of their injuries. I soon realized that they were speaking quietly because of the smoke that they had inhaled made their voices hoarse. In a sordid sort of way, they were fortunate, as there were others who could not speak at all. A short distance, maybe 150 yards north of where the majority of the airliner wreckage came to rest, I noticed a body covered by a blanket, laying in the front yard of a residence. Apparently, a woman that lived in that house, had heard the sounds of when the plane initially touched down, about 1/3 mile from her house, and came out into her yard to investigate. While standing in her front yard, she was hit directly in the head by one of the plane's landing gear and was killed instantly. Since I was at the crash site soon after the accident occurred, there were few ambulances or other rescue vehicles on the scene. However, they soon began arriving along with law enforcement officers. That brings me to another woeful scene that I witnessed. I noticed 2 burly, Georgia State troopers, scuffling with a man that they were attempting to pin to the ground. After finally handcuffing the man, one of the troopers stood up and began dragging the cuffed man by his arms. Meanwhile, the other trooper administered blows to body of the guy with his billy club. I did not know this, but the man in custody had been caught stealing passengers' luggage, which he found scattered in the debris field. He was caught loading luggage, and other items, into the back of his pickup truck. Because luggage, and other items, were scattered all over the crash site, that made for easy pickings for anyone that had nefarious deeds in mind. The man caught stealing, was, in my opinion, a low life, and got what he deserved from the troopers, and hopefully, later, from a judge. There were heroic deeds by many people that day, however, I did nothing other than observe, and as I said earlier, I wish that I had not even done that. 63 people died in the crash. 31 of blunt force trauma, 20 of smoke inhalation, and the rest, a combination of both. 9 people on the ground were killed. One of the pilots was killed on impact, the other died at the hospital from his injuries. 20 passengers, including the 2 flight attendants, survived. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that the probable cause of the accident was the total, and unique loss, of thrust from both engines, while the aircraft was penetrating an area of severe thunderstorms. It was later determined that the loss of engine thrust was caused by the ingestion of massive amounts of water and hail, which, in combination with thrust lever movement, induced severe stalling in, and damage to, the engine compressors. After 44 years of remembrance of the tragedy, on April 4, 2021, the New Hope Southern Airways Flight 242 Memorial Organization, dedicated a memorial with nearly 100 people in attendance, including survivors and family members attending from 4 states.